a lot of practices don't have a handbook, and that sounds simple, but it can be really powerful. I was always attracted to new products, innovation, new ways of doing things. I've got lots of data because I know that's something we want to be able to kind of not just talk about it, but give examples. But if the person is really not a fit for the job, it's far worse to leave the person in the job.
This is Optometrists Building Empires, and I'm your host, Ankit Patel. Each week, we'll explore the journey of practice ownership and leadership in optometry. Join us for insights and strategies from the top minds in our field. This show is sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team helps your office increase revenues, reduce costs, and reduce staffing headaches. Let's build your empire together. Today's guest is someone I'm super excited to have on the show. He's the president and CEO of the nation's leading alliance dedicated to supporting independent optometrists. He's previously built a distinguished 23-year career at Johnson & Johnson, where he led the North America division for AccuView, now known as J&J Vision, where he led global teams across consumer health, mobility vision, dermatology, and vision care. His accomplishments span the launch of world-recognized products such as Children's Motrin and Neutrogena, along with leadership roles that shaped billion-dollar businesses and mentored the next generation of healthcare leaders. He's the president and CEO of IDOC for the past 11 years. Please welcome Dave Brown. Dave, welcome.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I love your podcast, and it's an honor to be here with all the great guests that you've had on before. So look forward to today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. And we're members of IDOC as well, so this is a special treat for me as well. And let's kick it off. And you have a unique position. You've seen the industry from a completely different angle. So what is it that you see as the most important thing that helps other folks like optometrists grow their empires? What are some common threads you see?
Yeah, well, thank you again. And thanks for being an IDOC member. And like you, I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. I love talking about growth, as I know you do as well. And, I think that the most important thing is to have a growth mindset. But I think Ankit, people would say, well, of course, that's kind of a given, right? If you want to grow, you have to have the mindset. So I think we'll go a lot deeper today. And for me, it's about seeking partnerships, seeking partners who will help you grow. I've done that in my career. I've done that at IDOC, and I've watched a lot of IDOC members and frankly, a lot of independent optometrists take that pathway and really look for partners. And, I know I kind of like puns. And so, people say, don't go it alone, but maybe it's don't grow it alone. So I think today I'd really like to talk about what IDOC has to offer, some of the partnerships and the things that we can bring. I've got lots of data because I know that's something we want to be able to kind of not just talk about it, but give examples. So really looking forward to diving into it. But it's really about finding and seeking people who can help you grow. Don't grow it alone.
Yeah, I like that. Where do you see ceilings to growth for optometrists? Like, if you want to do it by revenue or size, however you want to split, but where do you see those blockages where it's like, man, if they really had someone help them, it would help them? Where are kind of those barriers?
Yeah, I think that, you can look at a lot of different ways, but I think revenue might be the easiest. There are a lot of independent optometrists who find themselves 6, 7, 800,000 top line revenue and asking or struggling to say, how do I get to the next level? We have a lot of data on IDOC members. Our average revenue is 1.4 million. And so a lot of times we do roundtables and meetings where someone at that level of 800,000 can talk to someone at the higher level. And then I think once you get to that level, another step change would require locations or more ODs. So, the other way to think about it is, are you a solo practitioner? Are you having someone as an associate OD a couple days in the office? There's a lot of things that, a lot of ways that a doctor can think about growing. But at the end of the day, in this business, sometimes it is people, right? You may need to add staff, you may need to add lanes, you may need to add locations. But I also think there are sort of those step change levels. And it's important for a doctor to know where they are. And then maybe today we can provide some insights on how to maybe go to that next level if they desire to.
Yeah, let's jump into that, right? So I'm curious, what do you see? So the $700,000 to $800,000. How are your practices and practices that you've seen successful in getting over that hump?
Yeah, I think that it really starts with staff. I think a lot of, when you speak to independent optometrists and some of the struggles that they have, staff I've been in the industry almost 20 years. It's always staff. And so, why? Why is that the case? I joined IDOC, I was the 14th employee. So I really had to think about very different than, running a large multinational business. And so, I had to kind of think about as a small business owner myself. And I really started to say, well, let's look at the staff. Do we have people in the right roles? Do we have them trained correctly? Are we investing in them? Do they feel like they're part of the team? And so, there's a lot that goes into the staff. And I think without that, you can't do it. When I first got to IDOC, I was thankfully I had a lot of great people around me, but I also tried to do too much myself. And so, it's really about taking a step back. Let's say you're that $800,000 practice, you got 7 to 10 people. Is everybody in the right position? Do you have the right talent? Do you need to go out maybe and find new talent? Are you paying people the right amount? All sort of interesting questions to ask. And I think that's probably one of the first things to do is if you want to grow, kind of do an assessment of where your practice is at.
Yeah. And as far as you alluded to getting help, finding partnerships, finding that is a common challenge, right? I remember when we were at that size, that was a pretty big challenge. And we ended up going through it and getting through it. But I'm curious, what do you see as some of the ways people get help and support to help get past that first hump, the 700, 800K hump?
Yeah. Well, I'll talk a little bit here about sort of what IDOC offers in the HR area. So, we have something called HR Now. It's included in the IDOC dues. And there's a couple things in HR Now, which I think are really helpful for practice. First of all, there's a 5-day-a-week hotline for advice. So when you have certain issues going on in a practice, you can reach out and ask. And I think that's really important because you have to face into issues. You can't just let them slide because then the culture kind of can go south. So that's something we offer. You also can write up and have a free handbook. And I think a handbook is really, really important. I think as a leader, the optometrist should be thinking about, is it clear what my policies are? Do people know what they're supposed to do when they walk in? Do they know what they're supposed to do, vacation policies? And a lot of practices don't have a handbook. And that sounds simple, but it can be really powerful. We also have job descriptions you can download. So that comes from our knowledge of sort of what really is important when you're hiring. But I think the biggest one, Ankit, is investing in the team. And I'll kind of give you an example. And I'm going to quote some folks, some IDOC members who have shared some of their sort of experiences. But we have the IDOC connection, which we'll talk about later. But a lot of our members now bring their staff to that meeting. And it's really, really powerful. So some might say, well, that's an expense. I got to shut the office down. But Dr. Beth Seidman, who is one of our great IDOC members, talked about it being investing in her team was one of the smartest moves she made. As she was trying to sort of grow her practice. And so she brought her entire team to the connection. And there was a 2-day optical training at the connection. So again, you're training your people. And that was all about selling and learning how to talk to patients differently. And, she said, it's the best decision I've ever made. They returned sharper, more confident, more self-sufficient, and honestly, kind of proud of themselves. And then they started bringing ideas. So that's sort of one example. But, I would suggest that optometrists seek out these types of training because it's such an investment in the people. And then once you get that set, you can start looking at other ways to grow your practice.
I like that. Yeah. And I'm curious, and I like to geek out about this because I'm going to dive in deeper because I'm curious about this. Let me reflect back what I heard first, and then I got a follow up to this. So
Sure.
what I heard was that the main issue that you see around that $700,000, $800,000 hump is HR and HR challenges. There's a lot of ways to get support, but getting HR specifically help with the HR Now with IDOC or whoever else. If you have an HR person, you can do that as well. But having that person on your side is important. Having clear expectations. And you said something that's really interesting that I think emotionally struck a chord with me. You said something, you just kind of went by it. It was, hey, you want to have policies in place with like disciplining people because if you don't, it sets the culture wrong. I think I've been on the other end of this. And when I was much younger, it was very much like, I don't want to do that because there's a lot of work to replace this person. Talk about that a little bit, because I think that the emotional struggle is very real for folks who are trying to grow as well. Talk about how to get support and your experience with that. I'll leave it kind of open-ended for you to take it wherever you want to take that.
Yeah, look, I appreciate you pointing that out. And I think we've all struggled with that. I have in my career. And, even when I harken back to the early days of IDOC, it really is hard to take someone who maybe is doing 80, 90% of the job just fine, or whatever the number is, and say, not the right person, need to maybe help them find where they can be more successful. And then you have a hole in the practice or a hole in the business. So I think that's the hardest part, but you have to sort of look farther out and say, what does it look like when the right person is in the job? What does it look like when that person is firing on all cylinders and is doing the job well? So it's kind of the short-term pain, long-term gain, but it is truly one of the hardest things, because then you're asking the rest of the team to step up, or you yourself personally may need to step up. But if the person is really not a fit for the job, it's far worse to leave the person in the job. And I know it's easy to say that, but I've had to do that in my career. But I appreciate you calling that out, because these are the little but very hard things to do as leaders to try to grow a business. And I really appreciate you saying that, because I've struggled with that too.
Yeah, and honestly, I didn't have IDOC at the time, but I had another I joined a group called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. Um, and I didn't realize that was what I was doing until I had someone reflected back to me. So that whole getting support is very real. I think I always thought when I was younger that I could just do it myself. And the older I get, I was like, yeah, no, this is not the case. In fact, I'm not even that good at everything I do. So, shocker, right? It's been a fun journey letting go of things. It's been more emotional for me. Um, so I'm curious, what about tell me about your journey personally. Like, what you have a similar your trajectory. You have a similar growth mindset. You've mentored folks. I'm sure you've got your own mentoring. What's really driving you to do your growth and help grow independent practices? What drives you?
Yeah, I love the question. Thanks for pointing out sort of my career at J&J, and I really enjoyed it immensely. But when I had the opportunity to, and I'll say not just be in contact lenses, but see the broader picture, it was really eye-opening. I mean, I knew a little bit about practices for sure, but coming to IDOC and seeing what independent owners face, is really something that was just, you know, very eye-opening. I was always attracted to new products, innovation, new ways of doing things. And I guess I'm sort of a lifelong learner, but what drives me now is really being able to bring programs and solutions for, independent owners to be successful in their practice. And so I love bringing ideas. I love bringing innovation. One of the first things we did was IDOC Select, which is a contact lens share program about 10 years ago, very innovative, and still is at the time. And so it drives me to always be looking at what's next, or how do we help, or because I love what independent optometrists do. I've met so many of them, and they're wonderful people. And what they're doing is, they're changing lives through better sight. In fact, that's our why at IDOC. We go to work every day to help them change lives through better sight. Well, how do you do that, Dave? Well, I might do that with great offerings. I might do that with HR. We'll talk a little bit about data and insights that we can offer. And all these things can help these independent men and women business owners succeed. And that's ultimately what drives me. I love the success stories. I love hearing people say, I really want to thank IDOC. I wouldn't be where I am without IDOC. Very, very powerful. It keeps me driven every day.
And I love the ethos that you all have, because it's about how can we best support the independent practitioner. And I wouldn't be a member in our practices if we didn't believe in it, right? And so, um, my perspective as a practice owner has been, you guys have all the technical things. If I need help with a lab, if I need help with HR, if I need help with my books, hey, you guys can help me with that. If I don't need help, that's okay. That's okay. I don't have to use it. But if I need the help and support, it's there. In addition to what is that saying? You are who you surround yourself with. So doing the in between, you have the yearly connection event, which is a fun event. I've been to it the last couple of years. And then you have like virtual meetups and events, like similar to the other organizations. There's
Sure.
constant meetups. But I think it's different having independent minded folks in these groups. And so you surround yourself with folks who you normally don't get exposure to. And I'm curious, because you guys are so devoted to that, how do you see the landscape changing You have AI coming. You have all these other regulatory changes for good and bad. Some states increasing scope, some states are allowing remote exams. Just all over the place. How are you all positioning your company to help support independent optometrists moving forward?
Yeah, look, change is constant, right? We know that it's going to be with us, and unfortunately, it is accelerating all around us. So, I think one of the first ways to impact this, and I appreciate you mentioning some of those things, Ankit, is getting independent doctors together. Our tagline is independent together. So we want people to remain independent, be fiercely independent, frankly, but it can be a lonely job. There's not a lot of opportunity. You go to work every day, you go home, and you're not really going to an office or with hundreds of people. So really, what's core to IDOC is what we call our IDOC member director study group dinners, or the study group dinners, where we get 8, 10 members in a room, and we kind of leave it up to them to talk about what they want to talk about. And what comes up are all the things you just said. How are you using AI? How are you using virtual assistant? What are you doing with dry eye? How about this latest change? What's going on with the AOA? Whatever it might be, we let them sort of run the show. We provide things to talk about. In fact, this quarter it is about AI, so we're providing some talking points, and we're helping the doctors kind of do that. So I think that's really a big part of it. But I would say the other part I want to talk just a little bit about is data and insights. And so one of the things we do at IDOC, we have something called IDOC Insider. Again, all part of the dues that you pay, but we actually pay to have GPN's Edge Pro in the practice. And so we are able to then provide to the practices a sense of where they stand versus their peers. We aggregate that across IDOC members. And in fact, I pulled a couple numbers just to kind of share with you. I won't go deep, but we just recently looked at average gross revenue of IDOC practices year over year, and they're growing 3.5%. So I'm sure some are above, some are below. Of course, it's an average, but that just even knowing that, even you nodded and said, well, that's good to know, because where am I? So back to the growth mindset. Well, I'm growing at 2%. Why is that? What's going on? Why am I? Is it my location? Is it my strategy? Is it my offerings? Whatever it might be. But at least now right? And so I think that's something that is critical, to have data and insights. And then, once you have those, we can look, well, is that something you need to do in marketing? Is that something you need to do in specialty services? What might be? And then the doctor may bring that to a study group dinner, or bring that to the connection and say, hey, I looked at my insider data. I'm a little bit behind, or my capture rate's not as much, or whatever it might be. What are you doing? Where are you on that? How are you doing, better at that, or whatever it might be? That's incredibly valuable. And I think that's how IDOC members can attempt to try to stay ahead of all this change by, again, being independent together and using the network, and using people from, someone who's in Florida talking to someone in Maine, right? There might be some nuggets and things that each can take away from that interaction.
Yeah, and I'm gonna build on that a little bit. And it's always, the nationwide numbers. It is a local business, and the fact that it's nice to have the local group, because you're comparing with people in your area. So yeah, everyone might be like 10% growth, because who knows, maybe in a fast growing area and city with very little competition, right? And so 3%, if you're doing 3%, you're actually not doing very well at all in your area. Versus you might be super saturated, a lot of closures, a lot of population decrease, and where 1.5% is gangbusters, right? Like it's a negative growing economy. And so having that peer group around you, it tells you're not crazy. And so
Correct.
I think
Yeah.
that's always nice to also have that, like, yes, this is the overall number, but this is what it means to you in your practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, just while you open the door to that one, I'll just talk benchmarks real fast, because I
Yeah.
think that's the other piece that, you mentioned the service. So we have a service called Books and Benchmarks, where we'll actually close the books for a practice. And so, that allows us to see some of the trends. So, actually we're over 200 locations now where we're closing books. The cost of goods sold have come down a little bit over the past 2 years. So again, something good to know. Profitability is up. That's sort of good to know. But I think what's really important about this is, back to how we're helping practices. So if you take a look, I just have a couple just quick notes here, Ankit. So, one of the owners that we do the books for, she went from looking at her financials every day, which I'm not sure is the right thing to do, because you might overreact or underreact. And now she only checks when she needs to. And she's really focusing on practice growth because she sees the trends and she sees where she's at. There's another one who kind of had a more accurate cash flow and helped them make a better choice. They were like, should I invest? Should I pay down debt? What should I do? That helped. And then the last one was a multiple practice, looking to build their empire, if you will. And they wanted a, clear picture of where their expenses were. And they were trying to figure out, do I grow into them? Do I cut them back? What do I need to do? So just a few examples, but back to how do we help a practice in all these changing times? If you don't know what's going on, I'm not sure you're really going to be able to do what's right. You might have a hunch and that might be right, but wouldn't it be better to do it off of sort of fact-based decisions?
Yeah. We actually had Nathan on the podcast too last year. And we dove deeper into some of those specific numbers. I encourage folks to listen to that one because we dove deep into where the breakdowns should be roughly. And I don't think it's changed too much since last year, but I know he'll give an update of the connections. So I'm looking forward to seeing.
Nathan's the best. Yep.
Yeah. Nathan Hayes, for folks listening, they want to listen back to that podcast. So curious, what are you most excited about in the near future and far future with, let's say, both IDOC and the industry?
Look, I think what I'm most excited about is where IDOC is going, where we're going to be able to take our membership and our offerings to independent optometrists. And so we've got a really tremendous pipeline of things coming. And, I think that to me is just gets me up out of bed every day to charge ahead, because we are now in a position that we really haven't been, in the past couple of years to invest differently and to do things different. And so maybe I'll just wade into that a little bit because, there's been a lot of news about IDOC this year. And, what I really want to just share, and then you and I talked about this, Ankit, is that we do have new investment partners at IDOC. We have Doug and Dame Mary Perkins, who are UK optometrists who have invested in IDOC. And some of them may not know that name, but they're very, very successful. They founded Specsavers in the UK, but they own a lot of different businesses around the globe. And they've chosen to invest in IDOC, and they're just different. They're different in the sense of, first of all, they lead industry leading businesses. So, and they know optometry as their optometrists themselves. And they love to support independent business owners. And, ultimately they're willing to invest in growth. And so back to how I love to innovate and do things differently, we're now bringing to the marketplace new things and new ways to really help the practice. And so there's going to be a lot more coming in the new year. We've already had some successes this past year. We've added some new Viewpoint is a new mobile app that allows members to talk to each other. So much more. We actually put a tariff freeze in back when tariffs were hitting. We were able to hold price there. So there's just a lot of things that get me excited. But ultimately, it's not about me or IDOC. It's about the membership. And so that's what, at the Connection, we're going to be announcing some new things. We've got some things in pilot that are probably not ready for prime time yet. But that's what I'm most excited about, because the independent optometrist, to me, still has tremendous growth possibilities ahead. Eye care is a wonderful business to be in, as you know. And so that's what we want to do, is just make it easier for them to change lives through better sight.
I love it. And we spent a lot of time talking about the maybe the $700,000 to $800,000 doctor. What about someone coming out of school? Let's talk about each stage of the journey a little bit. I'll give you a chance to kind of maybe use numbers or data, whatever you want to talk through. Talk to me about someone just out of school. They're interested in private ownership, not sure, they have debt. Talk through like that journey and what it might be like for them from your perspective. And maybe, you feel free to talk about how IDOC can help or other resources.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Look, I know there's a large swath of folks coming out of OD school, which is great. There is demand. There aren't enough ODs in some respects. So, I think that's an area, I know it's an area we're going to look at a lot more closely. And Nathan might have spoken about this as well. I wonder sometimes if it's the student right out of school, or if it's the person 5 to 7 years into optometry, maybe not in private practice, that might be the better target. But I think both can certainly be a place that we can now look at more deeply than we have in the past, Ankit. And so someone coming out of school, my suggestion back to our theme at the start is find partners to help you grow, whether that's IDOC or anybody else. Find a alliance or a group that can bring you great lens programs, great contact lens programs, great HR support, might do your books for you, can do your marketing, all things, frankly, that IDOC can do. But that would be, don't go it alone. Those days are done. I know there's a lot of people maybe listening who did this, and congrats to them 15, 20, 30 years ago. Wow, it's incredible. But the world's different now, more complicated maybe, but you get the point. Ask for help. And then somebody who's been in corporate optometry and doing very well may say, you know what, it's time for me to run my own practice. I want to do dry eye. I want to get involved in more pediatric. I want to do the things that maybe originally is why I went to OD school to begin with. So again, same story, buy a practice, get help. But to me, it's about, don't try to go it alone. There's people out there to help you across the swath. Find them and let them help you succeed.
I appreciate that. I want to switch gears just a little bit. Curious, you're a unique person in the industry. Can you share a story that was really formative for you, like made you who you are today? Could have been when you were much younger, could have been more recent, something that really is visceral and resonates with you.
Sure. No, that's a wonderful question. I would say that I'll go back a little bit now. But I had the opportunity at Johnson & Johnson to work on a product that is still out there today, but not owned by Johnson & Johnson. But it was a wheelchair, but it was more than just a wheelchair. If anybody's ever ridden on the Segway, the balancing device, we partnered with that inventor, Dean Kamen, and we put that balancing technology into a wheelchair. It's called the iBot. Really, really fascinating technology. The reason I tell that story is, I was probably, I was in my late 20s or 30s, and I had the chance to meet a lot of people with disabilities. And it just was, just transformational for me in terms of people who had, gone through incredible challenges in their life and maybe ended up in a wheelchair or whatever might have put them in the circumstances they're in. But just amazing energy, amazing desire to innovate, amazing desire to give back, and really, I guess the desire to really focus on what's important. And I guess to have that gift in your 20s was really special. I hadn't been around people with disabilities most of my life, and so that was really, really important to me. And that, or transformational, I should say, and that probably resonates with a lot of ODs, right? When I talk to ODs, a lot say the reason I went into this was because this doctor helped me with my vision, or I saw this situation, or I wanted to help people who have low vision, whatever it might be. So, again, that was transformational because I think what that made me realize is, what's important, keep the things focused on where you want to be putting your energy, putting your best energy. And I still have some great friends from that experience in my life, and it was pretty transformational.
That's pretty incredible. That is, I've had opportunity to work in similar field, and it is transformational. It's a lot more meaning in that word. At least I found some meaning. At least it was much more resonate with me personally. So I enjoyed it. So thanks for sharing that.
Sure. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, of course. So I want to leave with a couple of maybe some insights. So no matter where people are on their journey, what are some insights that you would, knowing what you know now, looking back at a lot of folks who are younger in their career, what kind of insights would you give to them that you've learned for yourself? And maybe even think of yourself as a younger age. Like, what kind of advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah. I think one of the, I had a boss who once said to me, control the controllables. I always thought that was a pretty interesting phrase, right? So you can't control everything in life, and it's impossible. So to know that at a younger age, or, to go back and look at that, I think one of the biggest ones was the reality of, in most cases, things aren't as bad the next morning as they are, when you're in the midst of a crisis. Might be too strong a term, but when something goes wrong, there's a sense of the world is ending. I can't deal with this. And, you wake up the next morning and you're fresher, you might have clearer eyes, and you're able to sort of attack the issue differently. So there's a lot in that finding, but breathe a little bit when you're going through something, think a little bit more than you can. So I think that was always, really good advice, just to say, even in the darkest moment when, patients are down or whatever it might be, and people aren't coming to me as much as they used to last week or something, find a way through it, right? Hey, maybe I need to do more marketing, or maybe I need to do this or that or something else. So it's never as bad as you think, although it can get dark at sometimes, for sure. I'm sure there's stories out there where it's been difficult, but I think those are a couple of things that have helped me as a leader, to recognize that there are going to be downs. It's not straight up all the time. You're going to have disappointment. You're going to have things that don't go well, and I guess again it's another cliche, but you do learn more from the things that don't work than the things that work. It's just the reality. When I go back to that I bought in a wheelchair, we got it approved, but it just never got to where we needed it to get to. And so you learn from that and you take some of those things forward. So, with hindsight at my age, looking back, those are a few things that, I wish, you could go back to your old self and say, hey, Dave, it's going to be okay. Or, you're going to get through this and everything's going to be fine. But, if that helps somebody out there, great.
I like that. That's really good. That's good insight.
Thanks.
So, Dave, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they connect with you?
So a bunch of different ways. Obviously with IDOC, people can, reach out, and we've got lots of different emails and stuff, but someone wants to email me, go right ahead. I'm dbrown@idoc.net. And, I love talking to members. I love interacting, getting out there. So, dbrown@idoc.net. And, if I can't help, happy to get you to somebody who can help, because, as we've talked about today, there's a lot of ways IDOC can partner with the independent optometrists. So happy to have people reach out, and that's what we're here for. We're here to help independent optometrists.
I love it. Well, thanks again. Any other parting thoughts that you want to, any words of wisdom you want to leave for folks who are trying to grow their optometry empire?
Yeah, look, I again appreciate your time today. It's been great chatting with you, and really good, thought-provoking questions. Always the tough ones to look back and look deep inside, but I do appreciate it. So look, I think that what I want people to take away is, growth is, it is necessary to grow. You have to sort of, and even if it's just growing in how you operate, or how you practice, or how you do things, I do want to put a plug in for the connection again. I know I've seen you, and I'll see you again this year, but it's a great meeting. We have some tremendous speakers. We get over 1,000 people. We're in Florida this year. It's February 12th through the 15th. At the Rosen Shingle Creek Resort in Orlando. A little plug for that. But we got a great keynote speaker. I don't know if you know this gentleman, Chad E. Foster. He's an incredible executive and a Harvard Business School graduate who lost his sight early in life and went on to pioneer accessible technology and lead billion-dollar business growth. So, again, faced with a disability, he turned it into, well, I'm going to do this and change this and be this. So, again, kind of interesting how that comes back full circle on this call, but we'd love to help. I guess that's the end of the story, right? We'd love to help people. We're here for independent optometrists. We want to help you change lives by improving people's sight. And it's as simple as that, but as hard as that. But I do appreciate your membership and being on your podcast today.
Yeah, in full disclosure, this is not a sponsored podcast. This was legit. Like, I thought it would be useful for the membership. So thanks again, Dave, for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
And I always like to do a quick takeaway. What I learned today was don't go it alone, right? I think there's the proverb, or don't grow it alone, right? I'm going to modify it now. But if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think that really applies here, especially to the field. And I really liked your insights on, hey, there's a lot of ways to get help, but the emotional side, being around people, connecting with people who are also going through the same thing, help with that as well. And IDOC really is a great resource for that, both from a personal standpoint and from people who I've talked to have really enjoyed IDOC. And so thank you again, audience, for listening. If you learned something, laughed, please share the podcast with a friend. And if you hit the subscribe link, and you won't miss an episode. And if you see the HubSpot link in the show notes to book a meeting, I'll send you a free copy of my book, Optometry Redefined. Thanks again, Dave, for being on the podcast. This has been another exciting episode of Optometrists Building Empires. We'll see you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Optometrists Building Empires. Thanks for joining. For For show notes and more, visit buildingempires.live. This show is proudly sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team was born out of staffing challenges my wife and I faced together, managing multiple optometry locations. We refined our approach at Classic Vision Care and now offer our expertise to others. If you're experiencing challenges with staffing and you'd like to set up a discovery call, we'd be happy to help you and connect you with the right resources. We'll see you next time.